Another week, another show, and we from BarcaFutbol are back again with another episode where we talk a little bit of Barca, a little bit of football, and everything in between. Now, today we have a good surprise for you. When we started this channel, we said that we would bring members of the community and experts alike to come and share their views on Barca and football with us. Today, we have our first guest, noted Spanish football expert for the likes of La Liga TV, BBC Sport, among others. You may already have been following him on Twitter or heard him do commentary on La Liga TV or in Champions League games. Please welcome Andy West, all the way from Spain.
Thank you for your welcome, firstly, and I'll try to live up to that introduction you gave me. If anyone's an expert on Barca, it's Dom. Good company today. But yeah, every season, for every football fan, whoever you support, the start of the season, the first weekend of the season is always exciting because you've had the summer to look forward to it. New signings have been made, players have left, you've got new coaches, new teams, obviously, with promotion. In terms of La Liga, I hope we have, and you guys won't hope this, I hope we have more of a title race this year because it was all a little too comfortable for Barca last year. Real Madrid did their thing that has been pretty common in the last decade of being really inconsistent. There's no doubting their talent, but their mental focus is not always there. I remember a game towards the end of last season when they lost 4-2 at Girona, the famous Tati Castellanos game when he scored 4 goals. And Real Madrid were all over the place, not in terms of how good they are at playing football, but in their organisation, their collective focus. And that happens too often for them. So that's the challenge for Carlo Ancelotti. And Atletico, they were the best team in La Liga in the second half of last season. More points than Barca, more points than anyone. Really, when Joao Felix left, that liberated the team. It liberated Diego Simeone from the feeling of compulsion that he had to give playing time to Joao Felix. And it allowed Antoine Griezmann to really run the team. And they were just outstanding. And not only results, but performances, which we haven't often said about Diego Simeone's team. Even when they won the league on that couple of occasions, they weren't always a dominant team and enjoyable to watch. But the second half of last season, they were. Real Sociedad, I hope they keep their growth. They're such a meritable club. There's so many things to like about the way they do their business, bringing in players to complement their core of homegrown players, attractive football. So I hope they keep going. And of course, Barca. I hope Barca keep improving because without any doubt, in the year and a half or so that he's been there, Xavi has massively improved Barca. Not always in the way that fans would like to see in terms of flowing football, but he's made them much more solid. And we'll talk about all of this in more detail. But there's still a lot of room for improvement in that squad, both collectively and with some of the individuals. And so I hope that happens because for me, living in Spain, working on La Liga, you want Real Madrid and Barcelona to be two of the best teams in the world. It's good for the league, it's good for Spanish football, and selfishly, it's good for me to watch the best football every week.
I would just echo what Andy had said already. It's exciting to be here again at the beginning of the season and looking forward. We're yet to see Barca actually do any of their... They have done some good transfers so far, but there's still so many holes to plug, so many issues to fix, not just in the transfer market, in the squad as a whole, when it comes to tactics and structures and who plays where and who plays what. So I'm excited. We need to see more from Xavi, not just results-wise, just on the pitch as well. So that will be interesting to see how Xavi deals with that, how he deals with the pressure from the fans, from the board, because let's not get this twisted. He may have won La Liga, but to be a Barca coach long-term, you need more than La Liga. And as difficult as that is to achieve, we need to have our cake and eat it too. We need to have performances and results. It's not easy, but that's what Xavi has signed up for, and he knows that. And hopefully he does a step forward towards accomplishing that this season.
Cannot agree more. Xavi's got a lot to prove this season, about 18 months into his tenure. All right, Andy, I wanted to touch up briefly with you and preface your blog, right? One of the things, you talked about many things, but one of the main things that you talked about, which was a concern for Barcelona, was its relatively weak and misfiring forward line. If you take into consideration Lewandowski's form that has been there in recent times, right? How do you think it's going to affect us
And the big one for Barca for me is Lewandowski, as you mentioned there, to bring it back to him. So much hangs on him. He is still an elite world-class number 9. And there aren't many of them. It's strange how, this is a debate for another day maybe, that there are very few world-class number 9s now. We've had them throughout this century, top-class centre-forwards. But now, if you look around world football, there aren't that many. Barca have one in Lewandowski. But he's 35 soon. He is coming off a season where he started superbly. He was magnificent the first half of last season. But after the World Cup, he was average in many aspects of his game. Still got a few goals. Finished up with 23, having scored more than half of them, I think, by the end of October. So that shows how few he got later in the season. And he just looked sluggish at times. So if Barca want to win 3 trophies or challenge for 3 trophies with the Copa del Rey as well, they're going to have to play around 60 games this year. How many of those can Lewandowski start? He's not going to start all 60. When can Xavi rest him? Who can play there instead? Because at the moment you look at the squad and there's no number 9, none at all. So that is the big question, and it's an unknown. Even for Lewandowski, he won't know how his body's going to hold up for the whole of this season. If he can be the player of 5-6 years ago, then Barca don't have any problems because he's always been very fit. He's always been able to play 40-50 games a season. But if he breaks down, it's a massive problem for Barca at the moment because they don't have another number 9. And we can talk if you like, in detail about the other forwards, but as talented as they are and as much potential as they've got to be better than they have been, none of the number 9s who can lead the line, play with their back to goal, link up play, bring in others, have that penalty area presence, the predatory skills inside the penalty area. There's no one like Lewandowski in the squad at the moment.
How do you see the forward situation evolving, Tom?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because the 1-0s were difficult to sustain because Barca have been really good defensively. They have been, but a lot of that comes down to individual quality rather than just some sort of a collective structural prowess that they have shown. That was my overall assessment. Let's put it that way. It's a thin one. I'm not a detailed one, but overall assessment would be such that it's more like individuals saving us, like Ter Stegen or Araujo or even Koundé, than just them working as a team to be a more stable defensive unit. So that was my assessment. So it's very difficult to rely on that week in, week out, especially in multiple seasons in a row. So I don't think that we can expect Barca to retain that high level defensive prowess. So if that happens, that means that the offensive side has to improve, because if we concede more, we will inevitably have to score more. Now, with Lewandowski being who he is, we know what his quality is. But yes, it is true that he's been misfiring a bit. And that comes down to multiple factors. His individual level has dropped a little bit with fitness, with injuries, with fatigue, with emotional baggage, all of that, which Andy has rightfully mentioned as well. But it's also about how you use Lewandowski, because if you have a team that is stable and can control the game, can actually do the build-up phase, the first and second phase, comfortably and consistently well, the need for your striker to come down into that midfield to combine, to link up, decreases. And if Barca cannot retain that control, if they cannot be sustainably and consistently good in the first couple of phases, that means that Lewandowski's role in deeper areas will be increased. And we've seen that if that happens, his efficiency just goes down, because he's not the player that he used to be when it comes to link up and control and first touch and layoffs and then darting back into space. He can do that to an extent, but the more involved he gets, or rather the more involved he got last season, the worse it looked in the long run. So I feel like if Barca improve their second and first phases of play, that will allow him to do actually what he's best at.
I'll just pick on that. I would like to ask both of you, what does Xavi need to tweak in this particular system that he has? Because the players that he has are the players that he has. That's what fate has dealt him. That's what he has to play with.
I think I totally agree with what Dom said a minute ago about the build-up phase from the back and through midfield, which often last season was very predictable and one-dimensional. At times, it looks as though the team didn't have too many ideas. Dembele on the right wing, and hope he can beat a defender and either go outside him because he was so two-footed, go round at the outside and cross from the byline, or cut inside and shoot, and then see if that would work. And now, obviously, that's gone because he's got the most dynamic, creative, explosive, unpredictable player. It might help the team balance overall because they can't just rely on, okay, let's feed it to the right wing for Dembele and see what he can do. They have to play through the team now with more balance. I think it will be great for Rafinha, who had an okay season. At times, he looked a real Barca player. He's a hard worker, much harder worker than Dembele. Not as gifted as Dembele, far less two-footed, but more of a team player. And I think he can have a much bigger season now that Dembele's gone and he's got the chance to play in his preferred position more often. But it will force the team as a whole to be more associative in midfield and move the ball more quickly to create space. That was the thing for me at times. It was also slow. It was very laboured through midfield. And one thing that will help a lot is Gundogan. I think he's a fantastic signing. He's been, in an understated way, one of the best midfielders in the world for the last 10 years or so. And I say understated because he's not flashy. He doesn't do step overs. He's not going to nutmeg someone. He's not flamboyant. He won't appeal to the fans. He just gets on with his job, but he can do everything. He's not a player who demands protagonism. If he can be convinced by Xavi, I need you to do this for the team, whatever it is, he'll do it. And so he can help make the team a lot more cohesive. And I think Romeo's a great signing as well, because he's a very different version of Busquets. He's much more mobile. He can help. I agree with what Dom said when we were talking about the defence a little earlier, and that last season it was often the individual heroics, especially Ter Stegen, that accounted for that excellent defensive record rather than the solid team structure. But Romeo will help with that because he will lock up the centre of the field in front of the defence. He will quickly close down danger. So he will improve the team's defensive structure in that way and hopefully give more control. And there's no doubt there's the tools with Romeo, Gundogan, joining Pedri. Let's hope he can stay fit and have a full season. Frenkie de Jong, who has always shown in flashes why he's so highly regarded, but he's not had a great full season yet. He can have one because we know how good he can be. Xavi, of course, who can just add some of his famous aggression and his dynamism. So I think there's a midfield there that's got the components. If the midfield is working better, moving the ball more quickly, using angles, creating space, then that makes everyone's job easier. So for me, that could be the key tactically this season, is Xavi finding a good formula for the midfield, because that would help protect the back four, make them do less work. It would help Lewandowski, allow him to focus his work in the penalty area. It would help the wingers as well. And it would give Barca a more control of games and a better all-round structure if the midfield is working right.
Yeah, I think that varying your structure, your formation, depending on the opposition, is a good way to approach this, because depending on how the opposition defend, how they set up off the ball, it will largely then, it will impact how you pick your players. And I think that's how we have to look at the right back position as well, which is a big topic in itself, because against these more expansive teams, the teams that will push aggressively, who will press you high, who will attack you, who will actually exploit the space, you need someone who's competent off the ball, and that's where Romeo also comes in. He solidifies that, as Andy has said. But against teams that kind of sit back and soak up the pressure, park the bus, you need someone who can unlock those blocks. So I think depending on how the opposition sets up, that's how Xavi should react as well and pick his lineup. The box midfield was initially designed to give Xavi more control. That's how he mentions it, but I don't think we've seen those results just yet. More control, more midfielders doesn't necessarily translate to more control, because it's all how you use those midfielders. And the left midfielder has been used more in an attacking sense, more as someone who will push forward, be in the box, in and around the box, make those runs, be an outlet even. And that's why we have seen Gavi suffer in that role, because he's not an outlet. He's not someone he can attack space, but it's not something that he should be doing. I think managing how you do things off the ball will have a big impact on how Xavi can control games moving forward, because I have explained this in more detail in one of my latest pieces, where I said that unless Xavi somehow fixes this aggressive mindset that Barca have off the ball, there is no way that he can comfortably transition this team to a more control-based team. Because if you are in a mindset that all you have to do is aggression and chase the ball all the time, it's very difficult for you to make that switch consistently. And then after this period of aggression, when you chase the ball, suddenly calm down and be on the ground and control the game, it's very difficult. And also it spends you physically. If you physically spend, you're less tactically or technically able to execute your moves, because if you're less technically set, you have a lower technical base, that means that you have to engage in more duels because your control is lacking. So it's a cycle. I'm not sure if I explained it well, but it's a cycle where you have less technical quality, which results in more duels. And the more duels you engage in, you have less technical quality. That's how it goes. And I feel like this is one of Barca's major issues. So it's not exactly about picking your starting midfield. The profiles that Xavi has are the profiles that he has, but it's more how he uses them. And that's the big talking point. The box in itself can be a controlling thing, but it can also be a very aggressive thing. It's all how Xavi sees his team performing. And at the moment, he sees them as this very vertical and very high-paced team. So as Andy has said, without Dembele, this may change, because now suddenly you have a Rafinha on the sides, on the flanks, and as good as he is, he excels at different things. So he might force Xavi to rethink his structure, rethink his tactics, because he cannot really rely on Rafinha to replicate Dembele's influence, not in the same way at least. And that also impacts how he chooses his right back, how he chooses his midfielders. So everything changes, because one key aspect, which was Dembele, even though he was unavailable for the majority of the games, he is a key piece. And if you remove that key piece, everything changes. It's a domino effect. You have to adapt everything that's around him. So yes, it will be very interesting to see how that goes. And whether Xavi actually tweaks his tactics, he should, but is he going to?
How far does Barca reach CL this year?
Yeah, that's the answer to that lies in, I think, what Dom is alluding to there, in how more balanced Barca can become. We know the aggression that he wants in terms of off the ball pressing. He's from the Johan Cruyff school, the Pep Guardiola school, where when you lose the ball, you win it back as quickly as possible and high up the field as possible. Press, that's the mantra of how to not have the ball. Fine, these opposition teams in the Champions League at the highest level, at the top end of La Liga, you have to have an ability mentally and tactically to say, okay, now we defend. Now we dig in. Now we stay organized. We let them have the ball for a bit. We rest without the ball. We keep our positions, and we accept that. That's something that you have to accept mentally, being prepared to not be the dominant force for 90 minutes. And that I felt was really lacking, particularly thinking back to the first game against Bayern Munich. Started the game really well, had chances, maybe could have had a penalty, could have easily taken the lead. Lewandowski missed some chances, but there was a period of the game when Bayern flexed their muscles, the crowd got behind them, they started to grow into the game and dominated, and Barca couldn't cope with it. They couldn't deal with it. I think we saw the same thing at Old Trafford as well in the Europa League, where fine, when you're dominant and you're moving the ball well and you're playing the way you want to play with the ball, great. And you can do that. You need to be able to do that to beat top teams, of course. And you need to be able to sense when the time is right to put pressure on the opposition defenders in midfield, not allow them to build up, not allow them to escape their own half. But you also need to accept you can't do that all the time. You've got to have times of the game where you defend your penalty area and you say, okay, we'll play in our half now. We might have to weather the storm for 10 or 15 minutes. That's what Barca couldn't do against the elite teams. And then the game against Inter Milan at Camp Nou, there was such a desire, such passion in the way they were trying to force the win, that they forgot to do the basics of defending. They were so focused on, we got to score, we got to score, we got to win, that they didn't stay organised. And it's that balance that I think has been missing. And it's partly a mental thing of accepting, yes, we want to have the ball, we want to dominate possession, we want 1,000 touches, we want 65% of possession, but we can't have all of the possession. You've got to be prepared to accept that. And I think that's a massive area of growth, especially in the Champions League.
Cannot agree more. Amazing insights from both of you, and fully agree as what we have seen. It'll be interesting to see how Xavi evolves himself and the team, and hopefully we get to see these things evolve in the team in the Champions League itself. Next up, Joao Cancelo, misfit, troublemaker. Nobody questions his skill set, but he's had problems with Pep. He has problems with Tuchel. He has had problems literally in every team that he has played. Now, the question is, does he, however, fit what Xavi is trying to do for this season?
He, of course, is a great player, but he's less versatile. And I just think he's a wrong fit all round for what Xavi is building, which is based on mainly youth with some experienced but selfless and humble experienced players. Gundogan is perfect. Lewandowski is perfect. Cancelo is not.
He is an established elite, but yeah, as Andy has mentioned, he has his downsides, and this personality, the ego, is one of them. But he can play both as right back and left back, which is a great appeal because Barca fans don't want to see Alonso being the rotation for Balde, which is, I can understand that. But obviously, he's a player who you could describe as a glass cannon in some sense as well, because he is devastating going one way, but then lacking the other way. And in that sense, I think he moves the needle a bit in La Liga, because that's where this won't get as punished. But he doesn't necessarily move the needle in Europe, which is what Barca want, because European football is much different than La Liga football, just domestic football in general. And Cancelo's deficiencies, I think, will be in the spotlight in Europe a bit more, and that's a big issue for me. But when it comes to just purely attacking contribution and even build-up and progression, none of the players Barca have on their roster are as able or as good on the ball or as technically sound as Cancelo. That has to be said. But what you have to understand is that Cancelo nowadays plays more like an interior, like a midfielder, than necessarily a right back or a left back. He wants to occupy those central channels. He wants to be involved across all the phases and then create. We keep seeing that the people keep saying that he will unlock Rafinha, for example. I'm not sure about that, because he isn't really an overlapping presence as such. I don't really see him being super effective as an overlapper. He can do it. He is competent overlapping, but he's much, much better when he goes inside. So when he's that inverted presence, he times his runs really well. That is true, but in a way, he tends to receive to feet and then move forward with the ball rather than just attack space and be this outlet of sorts that maybe Barca see him as that. On the ball, he is capable. He can cut in field from the right. He will cross with his weak foot even, which is a positive, and he will drive inside the left back, so inside the marker, and then combine with his forwards. All of this makes him a really potent player in attack. And on the left side, he's something like a Gundogan even, I would say, because he does a bit of everything.
All big teams go through this. They go through this period of growth, glory, right? And then that cycle passes. We saw it with Arrigo Sacchi and Milan. We saw it with Manchester United. They are still struggling. We saw it with Arsenal until Arteta came through, and still Arteta hasn't really won anything. And we saw it with Liverpool until Klopp came in, right? Years, 10, 15 years, where the teams really struggled to make any impact. Are Barca in that spiral? One. Second, how many years do we really think, or is it impossible, that they will come back to that zenith that they were used to the past decades that we have seen? And most importantly, is Xavi the man to lead that? Or do we need another person to make that shift actually happen?
I think Barca are not in that spiral anymore. They were, undoubtedly. I think even Luis Enrique, the end of his time, that spiral had already begun. Valverde managed to hold it off, keep it stable for a couple of years, but still the cracks were there. And then in the latter stages of his time, and then the Setien era and the Koeman era, and even at the beginning of Xavi's time, it was out. But now he has, like I said, right at the beginning, the thing he has done has made Barca much more reliable as a team, much harder to play against, much more stable. So I think they are coming back up. Xavi, is he the man? I don't think we can say he's not. I think we have to continue to give him chance to prove that he can be. He's still so inexperienced. He's had a season and a half coaching at elite level. He's undoubtedly made the team a lot better. He has shown himself to be adaptable as well. I like the substitutions he makes. He's very active in games. He doesn't just leave the team if things aren't going well. He will be inventive as well. He'll try different things. And he obviously has clear ideas, but he is not so wedded to those ideas in the way that perhaps Quique Setien is, that he won't do anything else. He has developed a team that's far more vertical than you would ever have associated with Xavi. The box midfield was a compromise that he felt he had to make because he needed to make the team more solid. Playing Koundé as a right back was something he had to do because he didn't really have anyone else he trusted there. He didn't really ever want to do it, but he compromises for what he thinks the team needs at that given time. But he still does have his way and his beliefs in what he wants to achieve. So we can't say for sure, yes, he's the man. He will take Barca back to winning the Champions League. But he's done enough to show that he deserves more time to prove that he can do it. How long till they are one of the best teams again? Could be within 2 or 3 years. They're not going to be the best team in Europe straight away. They're not at the level of maturity of Manchester City or Bayern as a squad, as a team. But they're not a million miles away. And I think if they keep moving in the direction that they have been in the last 18 months, they're certainly not far from challenging the elite. Could even win the Champions League. You don't have to be the best team in Europe to win the Champions League. Chelsea weren't the best team in Europe when they won the Champions League. So if you get to the knockout stages and things go your way, then you could win it. Yeah, they're moving in the right direction, and certainly Xavi deserves a bit of time and patience.
That's nice. Dom, you and I are much more radical in our views on whether Xavi is the man, but I'll put it right directly in front of you. Is Xavi the man?
It's a loaded question. Xavi doesn't have the leisure of an Arsenal rebuild or a Chelsea rebuild or a Man United rebuild or Liverpool rebuild even. He needs to show results immediately, and he needs to improve the team aesthetically and results wise immediately. We need to have our cake and eat it too. That's the thing with Barca. Xavi knows this. Xavi knows this. Being a Barca coach is one of the most difficult jobs in football, and he knows why. And I think he knew why even before he had signed. So I think it's too early to say, as Andy has alluded to. I wouldn't say that he's not the man. I agree with that. But is he the one that will restore this Barca dominance in Europe and in Spain? I don't know. In Spain, yes, we have seen that he has the ability in the team to dominate in Spain and secure title in Spain. But Europe is so volatile, so unpredictable that you can't really say Barca can win the Champions League. Barca can crash and burn the Champions League. We've seen that firsthand in the last couple of years. But this year, I would expect them to actually go on a much deeper run. Much deeper is maybe a stretch, but a deeper run nonetheless, at least past the group stages. That's my thing. Just go past the group stages, secure Champions League through those means, and then we'll take it further. I think he has the capacity to be the Barca coach, to mark an era. Is he going to be? I really cannot answer that question as just now. I hope he is. The Barca fan in me hopes that he is, but I'm not comfortable saying 100% that he will be that guy.
Thank you, Andy, so much for coming in, giving us your time and sharing your views with us. To our viewers, I hope you enjoyed this. We will keep on to continue and then bring more experts, more members of our community to share their views and their points of whatever they believe in, because this is what this is about. We're fans. We want to talk about football, and that's what me and Don love doing. So we'll keep doing that. So keep tuning in, hit subscribe. You know what you do. That's it for today. See you on the next one.